Lesson 33 is comparing and rounding decimal numbers. And first we're going to start with how to compare decimal numbers. Well, when we're comparing, what we're doing is we're looking at two values or two numbers, and we're trying to decide which is greater, which is lesser, or if they are equal. So you know, if you have 3 and you have 2, you know that 2 is less than 3. This is how we compare numbers. So for this lesson, we're going to look at decimal numbers that we're given, and we're going to compare them to put them in some kind of order, either from least to greatest or greatest to least. So let's arrange some decimal numbers, in order from least to greatest. Now to do that, when we compare, we have to consider the place value that the decimal has. The value of a place is determined by where it is in respect to the decimal point. So the place value is determined by how far away it is from the decimal. If we have 3 decimal numbers, we can align them up with the decimal point to help us compare. So I'm going to write three decimal numbers: 0.13, 0.128, and 0.0475. So the first step is that I'm going to line up all of these decimal numbers according to their decimal place value. So 0.13, and I'm going to align 0.128, and I'm going to line up 0.0475. Now, 2 of the decimal numbers here have a 1 in the 10th place. We have a 1 in the 10th place here and a 1 in the 10th place here. The third number has a 0, so we know that this is the lesser or the least of the 3 values here. So from least to greatest, 0.0475 is going to be first. Now, since the other 2 decimal numbers have 1s in the 10th place, we're going to move on to the 100th place to see which number is less. Well, here we have a 3 and here we have a 2. Since 2 is less than 3, we can say that this value, 0.128, is second, and the greatest value is 0.13. Okay, now I want to show you a concept called using the terminal 0 to compare decimals. And the terminal 0 is a 0 written at the end of a decimal number. So if we had a value such as, let me turn on my pen, let's see, 1.3. And then we added a terminal 0, that would give us 1.30. If we added another terminal 0, that would give us 1.300. Let's add one more just to show you that no matter how many terminal zeros or zeros at the end of a decimal number we write, it does not change the value. This value is still 1 and 3/10, regardless of how many zeros follow the 3. So when we compare decimal numbers, sometimes this helps so that both of the numbers we see will have the same number of digits after the decimal point. So if we had 0.12 and we had 0.012, we line up the decimal numbers, and I'm going to add a terminal 0 to the end of this first one so that everything looks the same. It has the same number of place values. Again, adding that 0 doesn't change the value of the decimal number. So now we can look and see which is lesser and which is greater. So if we looked at our place values, we have a 1 in the 10th place value here, and we have a 0 in the 10th place value here. So what that means is that this value is greater than this value. Now the same way we can add terminal zeros to the end of a decimal number, we can also remove them if we do not need them. So if we had the decimal numbers 0.4 or 4/10 and we had 0.400, this is still 0 and this is still 4/10. So we can get rid of these terminal zeros here and say that 0.4 or 4/10 is equal to 0.4, which is 4/10. So just as we can add terminal zeros, we can take them away to compare. Okay, let's take one more example of comparing decimals, and then we'll get into some rounding of decimals. So let's compare 1.232 and 1.23185. Well, we'll line up the decimal places, so I'll say 1.232 and 1.23185. I'll insert 2 terminal zeros so that all my number columns line up, and we'll start with our tenths place value. We have a 2 and a 2, so those are equal. We have a 3 and a 3, so those are equal. So we'll go on to the hundredths place value, the thousandths place value, which is a 2 and the 1, and we see that this 1 right here is less than 2. So we know that 1.232 is greater than 1.23185. Okay, let's talk about rounding decimals. To round decimals, we use the same procedure that we use to round whole numbers. So let me get a decimal up here written down for you. Let's take 3.14159 and let's round it to the nearest hundredth. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the number that's in the hundredth place value. So we have tens, hundredth, which is tenths, and hundredths, which is 4. And we're going to look to the number directly to the right, which is 1. And we look at 1 and we ask, is it greater than 5 or less than 5? Since 1 is less than 5, this number is going to stay as 3.14000. We write terminal zeros for the number of place values that we get rid of when we're rounding. So the answer to this would be 3.14. All right, let's look at a larger decimal number. Let's look at 4396.4315. And let's round this to the nearest hundred. Not hundredth with a TH, but hundred. Since we're rounding to the nearest hundred, what we're going to do is we're going to look for the value that's in the hundred place already. So let me get my color on here. If we have ones, tens, hundreds, that's 3, and we'll look at the 9. And we'll say that the 9 is greater than 5, so this is going to round up to 4,400. So you have to be able to distinguish whether you're rounding from 100 or 100th. Okay, and one more quick example with this. Let's take 38.62 and round to the nearest whole number. Well, the first number we have that is a whole number is 8. So we'll look at the 6 and say the 6 is greater than 5, so this is going to be 39.